Innovate looking a little bit different. We got 4 tiles going on today. I'm Mindy Carney, and I am with my partner in crime, Ember Bridge.
We have some really fantastic, amazing educators with us today. We have from All Saints Elementary School, and I'm going to let actually Mindy do the introductions because this used to be Mindy's home school.
We have our 2 teachers, Lynn Holverson and Christina Root, and they are what I would say 2 phenomenal teachers who really try to incorporate creativity into their teaching wherever they can. So we kind of asked Christina and Lynn to be here with us today because way back in July, when the world was even more scary than how we feel about it today, they brought students into the school to take on Camp Invention. And so they were really the first teachers that I was like, oh my gosh, how are they going to do this, creativity and collaboration with all of the protocols that we had to have in place. And so I guess that would be maybe the first question that I have for you 2 ladies is, what were some of the precautions that you really needed to think through to bring these kids back and get them creating?
Start, and then Christina,
okay.
You can come on in. I think the big thing was to work collectively with the county health and regulations they had in place so that all of that was very clear from our side, and we could pass that along to parents and help them understand that their students would be in a safe environment and that we were going to do all we could. We also worked with Camp Invention because they had some protocols in place as well. So just understanding what those expectations were and then voicing those to the families, I think put a lot of people at ease. We also were able to work face-to-face on some things and then virtually from different locations to work out some of the kinks before we really got things rolling. So Christina, anything else you want to add to that?
One of the big hurdles that we had to figure out in the first couple of days, right as camp was getting ready to start, was supply management. And there were a lot of protocols about what should and shouldn't be touched and who should be sharing materials and things like that. But taking kits that were really designed for collaborative, interactive creativity and figuring out how are we going to get the right materials to the right child without everybody congregating or without everybody touching shared materials. So that required some creativity and some problem solving, but everyone on the team was really eager to jump in and help solve those problems.
And giving an example of one of the protocols you had in place for that?
Materials?
Yeah.
Usually when we're doing Camp Invention, we have a material supply area where a lot of shared materials just sit, and kids just get to go back and grab materials from there whenever they need them or whenever they're feeling inspired. Instead, this time we had teachers distributing materials. So children could make requests and make a list of things that they wanted or needed. And then the teacher or the high school assistant in the room was able to come and collect supplies and bring them to them instead. So it was a pretty easy way to solve the problem. We just had to think it through first.
That's awesome.
Years past, there's a supply closet. That's kind of what Christina was talking about. But recyclables come in, people would bring all kinds of stuff, and it became community share. And another way that we had talked about doing it was labeling what you brought in for your supplies. So whatever your recyclables were, those were yours to work with rather than one big pile. And that helped kind of cut down on some of that, as well as, identifying the things that you might like from a collective group of materials, and then someone could get those and bring them to you. So there were a couple different ways we were able to approach that.
Now, I love the idea too of students really planning out what they're going to need to get them to think about their materials more, which is something we always want them to do. How were your students during this experience?
Struggled.
Sorry.
Some were really good at it. It depended on, I think some children are naturally more organized and more planners, and some really prefer to jump in and immediately start working with their hands. So I think for some of them, it stretched them and made them slow down a little bit at the beginning stages of the project. But most of them were fully willing to try because it meant that they got to be back in the building and they got to be working with friends and learning new things. So they were willing to adapt and try new things and be challenged.
So to kind of piggyback off of that, we talked a little bit about how the students were when they came into the experience. Do you see this? I mean, now you're in the classroom, you're back with your students. How is this affecting creativity for your kids? Or, what are some, pitfalls that you're seeing or roadblocks that you're coming across?
I'll address that first. I found that the lack of collaboration stunts some of the children. So because we're socially distanced and we don't have collaborative groups per se, the makerspace projects that we've been doing, at least in my room, I present the challenge, they design what they're going to work on, and then materials are passed out to them individually. So it's just a lot more independent. I mean, we talk about failures and changes that could be done. We test them one-on-one so the students can see it, but there's not that oh, I like that idea, maybe we could try this kind of conversation that's happening. So that has changed things a little bit. I will say for some kids, that's probably okay. Like they like to do their thing and that collaboration was kind of hard for them. For other kids, I think they get stuck. Like they thrived off of feeding off of one another and collaborating and using ideas to springboard new ideas. So that's just what I've seen here in first grade.
I think that's a really important point to hone into. We said you guys are at the elementary level, but first graders are able to do all of these things and be able to maintain these protocols, which is awesome. Christina, how about for your situation?
I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum for elementary school because I'm up in 4 or 5, but there's a lot of similarities. We're doing a lot more solo projects instead of group collaborative projects. And because 4 or 5s are really good at creative problem solving, I've been focusing a lot on problem solving challenges where they have to think their way through. So there's a lot less supplies involved and a lot more of like that planning and problem solving process. But some of them, as Lynn was saying, some of them really enjoy the solo aspect of it because they get to follow their ideas. And some of them just desperately want to work with friends and partners. I have found though that a lot of the ones that really want to collaborate are able to find ways to do so, even within our social distancing. They're really good at yelling across the classroom their ideas. So they find ways to communicate. And we have still been using kind of a communal supply area that the kids just aren't allowed to touch, that I am the supply giver. And so I've been handling that in the classroom kind of the same way we did at Camp Invention, where they have to write out their supply needs. And as I move around the room and ask them questions and keep them thinking, I pass out additional supplies that they have requested. So it is still working, but a lot less collaboration, a lot more solo problem solving type challenges.
So I guess the last question then is, why do you think with all of the problems that you might have with the collaborating and the creating, it's probably more complicated now and adds more stress maybe to your day as teachers. Why do you keep doing it? Why is it still so important to have our kids creating?
For me personally, I think it's just another outlet. Right now, we're all adjusting to new things that none of us were expecting. So I think it's a good time for them to kind of relax in some respects and just let that creativity out. It also is a good time for those students that struggle with making mistakes. Because it is not as structured, like, if you're working on a particular problem, there's an end result that it has to be at. Well, when we're making, it can look like a lot of different things. So an example was I have a student that's very analytical, and we just worked last week on runaway pumpkins, and they had to try to stop the pumpkin. So he worked all the way through it, didn't like it, crumbled it up, and was headed to the garbage can. And I said, "Oh, you did so much work." So when it was his turn to test, he walked up and he said, "Well, it was an epic failure, but," and this is a first grader, and he got up there and he put something together and it actually worked. So we discussed that, like, some people are used to having that set step by step and an end result. So this is good for them to understand that we make mistakes, we can still be successful even through that and learn a lot from it. So I think they need that, and they need that outlet and that time to just kind of let their creativity go.
My daughter loves that book, by the way. Runaway Pumpkins, she loves that book. So
story.
I need to add a little maker challenge in for Estella.
I agree with pretty much everything Lynn just said. But also I think that it's something that the children are really passionate about. And getting kids really engaged with their learning can be a challenge sometimes. But the moment you introduce a project like this or some time for them to really express their creativity, they're in, and they're in all the way. And so it's so important, especially I think in the older grades, because they don't buy into everything. And so if you give them that chance to really buy into what they're learning about and find ways to integrate what they're learning about into something that they care about, then it really increases the educational outcomes as well. So it's giving them that chance to really express themselves, but also make them care about what you're learning.
You got me right here, Christina, right
I
here.
know, I'm like, oh, you're so inspiring to both. Oh man.
We thank you so much for sharing some tips and ideas with us, and hopefully they can continue to help inspire other people that may have been trying some creative things but have been a little hesitant. I think that the ideas and suggestions that you guys shared are so doable, and I hope that that will help other teachers to be able to pick up and continue on with their creativity in the classroom. So we always end Think, Make, Innovate with our catchphrase. Not sure if you know it or not, but we always end with have fun making. So do you guys want to join us?
This is always fun on Zoom to try and do it together. It's real fun. So we'll see if we can get it.
That's true. All right. 1, 2, 3. Have fun making.